So you got Poker Cruncher up,
Yep.
um, and we're talking about not going over 8% when we're flatting. Um, so yeah, tens, nines, eights, sevens, and then you can go ahead and add those suited broadways. You could also throw ace jack suited, ace ten suited in there if you decide to not three bet with those. So you could make an argument to me that it would be okay to flat with those, and then you can also add some of those suited connectors. So if you wanted to go on down the list and go 10-9 suited, 9-8 suited, 8-7 suited, all the way down to, let's say 5-4 suited, instead of three betting with those, that'd be all right. But now, you're starting to get pretty wide there. That's 6% or so. And now watch how quickly that percentage goes up if you add any of those offsuit Broadway hands, right? Just try adding a handful of those. Um, it goes up so quick. Right, so like now you're quickly spiraling out of control. You got like 10.6%, right? So press whatever key you need to press to remove those. I think it's Control to remove the Control key, and then press on on those offsuit hands to get rid of them. There you go. So shave that down a little bit and focus mostly on those hands. Also, if you're playing against Old Man Coffee, who's opening an earlier position, you could go ahead and add all of the pocket pairs down to deuces, right? Because
Not to interrupt you, this is recording, right?
Yep, it is recording.
Okay.
So if Old Man Coffee's opening, you could add those all the way down to deuces because his range has a lot more inherent value, right? And now you see you hit 8.3%. I would recommend not ever going wider than that. And that will just save you a ton of heartache throughout your poker career.
And this is flatting in position.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I want to show you something real quick. I had a question about. I was playing with this while you were getting back on. So who raises?
Right.
Hijack.
Mm-hmm.
I flat, or what do I flat? What do I do on the button? So this kind of threw me off. It advocates three betting 5-4 suited, 6-5 suited, 7-6 suited, but then folding 8-7 suited, 9-8 suited, 10-9 suited. Why is that?
It's because those middle suited connectors start to converge with the weaker broadways in your opponent's opening range, right? So if your opponent has
trouble,
if your opponent has king queen and the flop comes jack 10-9, and you've got the 8-7, like you're not, you could lose.
So people really overvalue those hands then, and I remember reading somewhere where it was like 10-9 suited isn't as valuable as what players think it is.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And it's because you just start to run into those Broadway hands, and it's like, why expose your stack, especially when you're 200 big blinds deep? Why expose your stack to some kind of cooler situation like that? Everybody just wants to write that off as a cooler situation, like, oh my god, he flopped the nut straight and I flopped the second nut straight, or the third nut straight, right?
Yeah.
It's like, it's not really a cooler though when you're that deep. It's your fault for even being in that hand to begin with. So that's one thing. Like if some kind of crazy flop like that comes off where you end up losing a stack, make sure that you go back and evaluate your play pre-flop, and the majority of the time if you're being honest with yourself, you'll be able to identify some kind of leak that you could eliminate from your game. So that's pretty much all I have to say about flatting. I hope that helps you a little bit.
Yeah, it does.
Almost every person that I've coached has said that, like, the strategy that Snowy is suggesting and the strategy that I advocate are just significantly easier to play.
Yeah.
And it's just so much more definitive. There's a lot less guesswork. And it just seems to perform much better, even in live games. So.
And there's still poker. People say poker is dead, but there's still plenty of people making mistakes.
It's not even close to dead. Like, the live poker is as tough as it's ever going to get right now. So if you can beat the game the way it is right now, you will be able to win perpetually, as far as I'm concerned, because very few people are willing to spend the time off the table and have the discipline to construct their ranges the way I'm suggesting. You know, I like go around and just see how many people even study poker off the table, right? I think it's like less than 5%, right?
It's like I mean, almost looked down upon. Like if you study off the table, you're not good or something. It's like oh, you need to have a coach. Like some players are just so their ego is just like so big that they think they're so good that they don't need a coach. But I mean, the greatest athletes and businessmen and entrepreneurs in the world have coaches. So I agree with you.
Right, like David Einhorn is a hedge fund managing genius that's worth like $14 billion, and he still gets coaching from Tony Robbins, right? And you know what I'm saying? And Robert Kiyosaki is a genius billionaire real estate mogul, and he still reads real estate books, right?
Yeah.
The same thing goes for poker. Like Fedor Holz is a genius high roller 22-year-old, and he's still spending a tremendous amount of time off the table studying. So that argument is not valid, especially when you're struggling to beat 510. That you just there's nobody out there that could make that argument to me where I would buy into that. Like you have to spend time off the table and use artificial intelligence to your advantage. And anybody that wants to criticize me for quote unquote cheating or using shortcuts, whatever. I'm going to use every resource available to me to get better, and those who don't will get left behind.
Yeah.
But the good news is that live poker is as tough as it will ever be. So if you can beat the state of the games right now, you will always be able to win because your opponents are not motivated enough to improve. So that's a very comforting thought. That's why I sleep well every night. So you want to get into some of the post-flop stuff I wanted to talk about?
Yeah.
All right, that sounds good to me. So I did a Q&A through email with Poker News, and I think this is like one of
this is how I found you, was this article.
Okay, so this is like one of the best articles that I've ever written, probably the best one. And I like this article so much that I would probably suggest that you bookmark this in your web browser, and then make sure that your web browser syncs with your phone. So I'm not sure.
Can you send me the link?
Yeah, absolutely. This is like, I used to send people all these PDFs and stuff, and then I was like, I should just send them this article because this is all you really need. So, I just sent it to you in the chat box.
Okay.
You see that?
Yep.
Okay, so you can pull that up, and I'm not sure what your favorite web browser is, but whatever one it is, it should be able to sync with your phone. So one of the great things about Safari is that like all your bookmarks and all your search histories will sync with your phone. So I would bookmark this in your web browser on your laptop, and then also bookmark it on your phone if it doesn't do that automatically. So if you're sitting at the table and something bad happens, you can just click on this link and then scroll down a little bit and take a look at the template and ask yourself, did I truly consider all of those factors?
And I read this article on a day off before day 2 in the tournament, and like I read this and I was applying it the next day at the table. So, and then this is how I found you. So this is working as far as getting your coaching out there.
That makes me feel better because this is what I practice. This is what I preach. It's just slow down. It's probably a great piece of advice that I could give you. I think everyone that I coach and everyone I'm playing against is kind of just on autopilot because you've been playing long enough. Like after you break 1,000 hours of live poker, you're kind of just like on autopilot. It's very important to avoid that. And so everything you're doing pre-flop, just ask yourself, how am I going to make money post-flop? What am I going to do to create a profitable situation post-flop? And that starts with just asking yourself, what is the pre-flop dynamic? Where am I in relation to the button? And what are the effective stacks, right? Like if you can answer those 3 questions, you're well on your way to being an excellent post flop player. So another way to phrase this would be, what is your range? What is your opponent's range? And how does your opponent perceive your range? Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So some guys will actually slow down enough to consider, like they'll open the button and they'll slow down enough to consider the range of hands that their opponent is calling with out of the big blind, right? Like that's a good first step. But what they don't realize is that the range of hands that your opponent is going to defend with out of the big blind, if he's a thinking player, that is a metric of how wide he thinks you're opening the button, right? So if he thinks you're opening 45% of hands on the button, his range is going to be significantly wider than it would be if he thought you were opening 25% of hands, right? So it's important to understand how your opponent perceives you. And this is separate from your table image, right? Because every player at the table perceives you differently. You have 8 different images at the table. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So every player perceives you differently. Everybody is going to react to what you're doing differently. So just slow down enough to consider how your opponent perceives you, and as a result, what does that make his range? So what is your range? What is your opponent's range? And how does he perceive your range? The other thing, like the important part of that, is not forgetting what your own range is. So when and I just see this all the time when I'm watching these I'm watching these high rollers, or like the super high roller bowl on Poker Central.
Yeah, I saw that.
And somebody ends up making a sick call later in the hand, and you're like, oh my god, how did he make that call? It's usually because the preflop opener forgot what his range looked like to his opponent. Even at that level, I think people still forget that. They if you're opening from a position where you don't have 5-4 suited, and then all of a sudden on the river you're trying to represent that hand along with a few other combos of nutted hands, it's going to be really difficult, and people can see through that, especially at that level, right? The good news for you is that people aren't thinking on that level in smaller stake games, but it's just important to factor that in. So don't forget what your own range looks like. So if you're going to try and represent something on turns and rivers, make sure that hand is actually in your range. Is it credible? Does your story make sense?